Everyone thinks betrayal comes with a bang, but sometimes it comes wrapped in a smile and a home-cooked meal. My mother wasn't the villain in anyone's story, especially not mine. She was the woman who raised me alone, who said she'd protect me from the world, and I believed her, even when I shouldn't have. When my ex-husband died, I thought my pain had finally ended. I had no idea it was just the beginning. The real betrayal didn't come from the man who left me. It came from the woman who never did. I used to think my mother was the one person in the world I could trust without question. She raised me alone after my father vanished when I was just 4. There were no explanations, just his absence and her presence. Loud, all-consuming, absolute. She told me often, "It's just you and me against the world." And I carried that like scripture. I watched her work 2 jobs, skip meals so I could eat, sew my costumes by hand for school plays. Everyone said she was a saint. I believed them. I believed her. She used to whisper late at night when I couldn't sleep, "You'll never go without Emily, I promise." And that promise anchored me through every childhood storm, every scraped knee, and mean girl at school. But promises, I would later learn, have fine print, especially when they come from people who use love as currency. She told me not to worry about my college savings, that she was putting money away for me since the day I was born. I never questioned it. When I turned 18 and asked about the account, she said she'd used it to help with my future, which apparently included paying off her credit card debt and fixing the roof. I remember feeling confused but guilty for even asking. "Everything I do is for you," she said, her voice cracking, and I apologized. I remember that, me apologizing. There were so many moments like that. Small, strange moments that should have raised red flags, but instead just stacked themselves into quiet, unspoken unease. When I got my first job, she insisted I give her access to my bank account, just in case anything ever happened. When I moved into my first apartment, she insisted on having a key. When I started dating Thomas, my ex-husband, she accidentally ran into us at the grocery store 3 times in 2 weeks and always had something offhand to say. "He seems sweet but quiet. Men like that usually have something to hide." At the time, I thought she was just overprotective, loving, a little intense, maybe, but after everything she'd done for me, didn't she have the right to be? When Thomas and I got engaged, she gave me her wedding ring. "Your father left, but I want you to have something from us," she said. I was so touched. I wore that ring with pride, feeling like I was carrying the best parts of my parents into the future. I didn't know then that she had kept it not out of sentiment, but out of control. After we got married, things started slipping. Thomas became more distant. My mom became more involved. She called every night. She'd ask if Thomas was pulling his weight, if he treated me well, if I ever felt uneasy around him. "Men can change after marriage," she warned. "I just don't want you ending up like me." It wasn't until years later that I learned she'd met with him privately, multiple times. She told him things about me, twisted truths, dug up past insecurities. She told him I had inherited her emotional fragility, that I was too dependent, that he should be careful with his finances around me. I found this out from a text she forgot to delete on her phone, which I saw accidentally when she asked me to help fix her email. The message was from him, sent 2 months before our divorce. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll handle it." That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't confront her, not yet. I told myself there had to be a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe she meant well, that she was trying to protect me in her own twisted way. But deep down, I felt it. That slow burning recognition that maybe the person I'd spent my whole life defending had never been defending me. I started noticing more. She'd always discouraged me from reconnecting with my father's family, saying they didn't want anything to do with me. But I found letters, years of them, that she had hidden. My aunt had written to me on every birthday until I was 15. "We miss you. We hope you're okay. We love you." I never saw them. My mother never mentioned them. She chose silence for me and called it protection. I began to trace back moments of my life, not through what she gave me, but what she took away. Still, I didn't hate her, not then. I couldn't. How do you hate someone who gave you everything, even if it came with invisible strings? That's the part no one tells you about toxic love. It doesn't scream, it doesn't hit, it whispers, it hugs. It says, "I'm doing this for your own good." And eventually it teaches you to say, "Thank you for the pain." I used to think I was lucky to have a mother like mine. I don't think that anymore. The day of Thomas's funeral was warm, unseasonably so. The kind of warmth that makes black dresses stick to your back and mascara slide. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because I didn't know what I felt. Relief, maybe. Guilt for feeling that relief. A low hum of confusion. The church was packed. Family, coworkers, acquaintances. I sat near the back, alone. My mother arrived late, sweeping in with practiced grace and quiet whispers. She didn't sit with me. She didn't even glance my way until the service ended. That's when she came over, leaned in close, and said with a voice like silk stretched over steel, "Don't make a scene, Emily. He didn't leave you anything. Let it go." She smiled as she said it, just loud enough for me to hear, soft enough that no one else could. I didn't reply. I didn't ask how she knew what he did or didn't leave me. I just nodded. Then I walked out into the parking lot, lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years, and stared at the clouds. Something was wrong. I felt it in my stomach before I knew it in my mind. 2 days later, I went to Thomas's apartment to help his sister clean. She handed me a box of his things. "He kept this in his closet," she said. "Thought you might want it." Inside were photos, receipts, a few old notebooks. At the bottom, tucked beneath a faded t-shirt, was a USB drive. No label, no note, just a small matte black rectangle that pulsed in my palm. I didn't open it right away. I held on to it for 2 days, afraid of what it might confirm or deny. But curiosity always wins. When I finally plugged it in, there was one file. Audio, dated 6 weeks before Thomas died. I hit play. "I want to change my will," his voice said, steady, calm. "I want Emily to have the condo, the investment account. Everything else can go to my nephew, but she should have that. It's what's fair. I didn't treat her right." My breath caught. The file continued. Him discussing logistics with a lawyer, clarifying details, spelling out the terms. And then, at the end, just before the recording stopped, he said something that turned my stomach inside out. "My mother-in-law can't know about this. She'll make it messy. Just send the paperwork directly to me." The silence after that felt like a scream. I sat there for an hour, frozen. Then I called the law office, disconnected. I searched for the lawyer online, retired, no forwarding contact, dead end after dead end. So I turned inward. I turned homeward. I confronted my mother the next morning. Not with accusations, but questions. Casual, careful. Did you ever talk to Thomas before he died? About anything legal? She blinked, took a sip of coffee, and said, "Of course not. Why would I?" I let her lie, let her believe I still believed her. But later that night, I checked the old nanny cam I'd left in my guest room years ago, the one she always used when staying over. I'd forgotten it even existed until that moment. I pulled the SD card, plugged it into my laptop, and started scrolling. There it was, 3 weeks ago. Her alone in my room, rifling through drawers, my filing cabinet, my emails. She held up envelopes to the light, took photos, made calls. One of those calls was to Thomas's lawyer. "Hi," she said, voice syrup sweet. "This is Linda, Emily's mother. I just wanted to clarify something about the estate. No, she's not in a good place mentally. Very unstable since the divorce. I'm worried she might do something drastic. I'd prefer if all communications went through me." I watched it 3 times, rewound, rewatched, and each time it felt worse. She wasn't just lying to me. She was cutting me out, silently, efficiently, and with a terrifying calm. And suddenly, everything from my past slid into place, like puzzle pieces snapping together. The way my college fund disappeared, the hidden letters from my father's side, the whispers to Thomas, the passwords she insisted on holding. This wasn't care, it was control. I stared at the paused frame on my screen, her face frozen mid-call, composed, pleasant, destructive. That night, something inside me shifted. Not rage, not heartbreak. Something colder, sharper. I didn't tell her what I knew. I smiled at breakfast the next day. I let her talk about the funeral, about how tragic it all was, about how lucky I was to still have her. But I had already begun drawing the blueprint in my head, the timing, the evidence, the moment. And I knew for the first time in my life, I was going to take the power back. I looked at her across the table and thought, "You taught me how to survive. Now I'll show you what I learned." I played my part well. For weeks, I was the dutiful daughter, soft-spoken, present, agreeable. I let my mother believe I had moved on, that I accepted what she told me at face value. "He didn't leave you anything, sweetie," she said again one evening, folding laundry at my kitchen table, like she hadn't once betrayed every ounce of trust I had. I nodded, smiled. "I know, Mom, I'm just glad you're here." The lie was so natural to her, it felt like breathing. And that was what gave me the edge. People like her never think you're paying attention when you're quiet. But I was. And I recorded everything. I bought a new phone with dual recording apps, hid a small voice recorder under the dining table, installed a keystroke tracker on the shared home laptop she occasionally used when visiting. She never suspected a thing. She was too busy crafting her narrative of the fragile, grieving daughter who couldn't possibly handle the truth. But I wasn't fragile, not anymore. One of the first things I uncovered was that the original diocese copy of Thomas's will had never been officially processed. That meant the document she claimed existed, the one leaving me nothing, shouldn't have been on file. So I started digging. It took 3 separate phone calls and 1 in-person visit to the county clerk's office, but I found it. A document submitted under Thomas's name 2 weeks before his death, dated, stamped, signed, by her. It wasn't his signature, it was hers, shakily mimicking the way he wrote his T. But I knew. I had signed cards with him, papers, our mortgage. I knew every curve of his handwriting the way you know your own breath. She had forged it, filed it, lied to the state, and won. But that was only one piece. I needed more. I needed proof of intention, of pattern, of manipulation. I reached out to the one person I thought might still owe me the truth. Thomas's old attorney. He had stopped taking my calls after the funeral. No replies, no responses. Until I showed up at his office unannounced. He looked tired, older than I remembered. But when I told him I had the audio file, the real one, he sat down slowly and whispered, "I'm sorry." He'd been threatened, not physically but reputationally. My mother had called his senior partner and raised concerns about bias, unethical prioritizing of ex-spouses, a woman with mental health struggles being gifted large sums. "She came prepared," he said, "and relentless. She made me doubt myself." He agreed to help, quietly. He directed me to a forensic handwriting analyst. He gave me access to emails between the firm and Thomas that had mysteriously disappeared after the will was changed, and he reminded me of something I had forgotten. Every estate filing left a digital trail. All I had to do was follow it. I brought in a financial advisor, a friend from college. She owed me after I helped her through a messy breakup years back. And now she was a shark in a pencil skirt. We traced transactions, found an account opened in my name but controlled by my mother. Several $1,000s withdrawn the month after the divorce. That was just the beginning. And then there was Katie. Katie was my half-sister, my father's daughter from another marriage. We'd barely known each other growing up. My mother made sure of that. She said Katie's mom was manipulative, bitter, unstable. She warned me about getting close, but curiosity led me to send a message. Short, hesitant. "I'm trying to understand some things. Would you be open to talking?" She replied within an hour. What followed was a 6-hour phone call that shattered everything I thought I understood about my family. Katie had stories, dozens, about letters she'd sent that were returned unopened, about birthdays ignored, about money borrowed and never returned, about how our father had wanted to keep contact, but Mom made it impossible. "We thought you didn't want us," she said. "No, she didn't want me to have you," I whispered back. We cried, then we planned. We were building a network, a web, not of revenge, yet, but of truth, quiet, strategic, meticulous. And as it grew, I kept thinking about the power of silence, about how often women like me, daughters, wives, ex-wives, are told to be quiet, not stir the pot, not make things uncomfortable. But maybe discomfort was exactly what she deserved. Maybe silence wasn't strength. Maybe it was submission. I thought back to something Thomas once said in the early days of our marriage, long before things got dark. "You always think the best of people," he told me. "It's sweet and dangerous." I didn't believe him then. I believe him now. The church hall was bright with soft candlelight and pastel ribbons. Children ran between pews, giggling in their Sunday best. My nephew was being baptized, and the entire family had gathered, smiles polished, secrets buried. It was the first time in years I'd seen so many of them in one room. My mother floated among them like a queen hosting court, nodding graciously, accepting compliments, clasping hands in practiced warmth. She wore blue that day, her favorite color, said it made her feel trustworthy. I sat near the back, silent, hands folded in my lap, the USB drive tucked in my coat pocket, its weight like a heartbeat against my chest. The ceremony moved quickly. The priest's voice was kind but forgettable. My nephew cried when the water touched his head. People chuckled, cameras clicked, Then came the speeches. My mother rose when her name was called. She stepped up to the podium with that effortless grace she had perfected over decades. Her voice, as always, was clear and gentle. "Family," she said, "is the greatest legacy we leave behind. Not money, not property, but love, connection. The children we raise and the values we pass on." She looked directly at me when she said values. I smiled. When she finished, the room applauded politely. She bowed her head, stepped down, returned to her seat with the ease of someone who believed the performance was over. But I stood. There was a pause. Not many noticed at first, just the creak of the wooden floor beneath my shoes. Then the silence spread as heads turned one by one. "I wasn't asked to speak," I began, voice low, steady. "But I'd like to share something Thomas left behind." I walked to the front, holding up the paper in my hand, clean, printed, signed, the original will. There was a ripple of confusion, polite discomfort. My mother sat very still. "This is Thomas's last will and testament," I said. "Signed, dated, witnessed, 6 weeks before he died." A few people shifted in their seats. "In it," I continued, "he names me as the beneficiary of his condo, his investments, and personal assets. He wanted to make peace, to take responsibility for the way our marriage ended." I paused, let that sink in. And yet somehow that version never reached the courts. Another will was filed instead, one that excluded me entirely. Now the silence grew sharp. Some eyes turned to my mother. She adjusted her posture but said nothing. "I have a copy of the audio recording," I said, "of Thomas meeting with his lawyer. I have a timeline. I have handwriting analysis proving forgery. And I have emails showing manipulation, fraud, and obstruction." Still, she didn't speak. "I share this today," I said, scanning the faces in the room. "Not out of bitterness, but because there's a child here who will grow up in this family. And he deserves to grow up with the truth, not a legacy of silence." I placed the document on the podium, pulled the USB from my pocket, and set it beside the paper. Then I looked at her. She was smiling, small, tight, but still a smile. Like nothing had happened, like none of it mattered. The rest of the room didn't know what to do. Some stared at me, others stared at her. No one clapped, no one spoke. It wasn't chaos, it was worse, it was stillness. Afterward, I didn't stay. I walked straight out into the cold air, my hands shaking not from nerves, but release. The fallout began within hours. That evening, one of my cousins, a junior lawyer, called to ask for copies of the evidence. Another cousin, one who'd always felt distant from the family, reached out to say, "I've suspected something was wrong for years. I think she did something similar to Grandma." I blinked at the message. "What do you mean?" "She altered a will, years ago. Said Grandma was confused, not in her right mind, took over everything, cut us out. By the end of the week, old records were being pulled. Estate documents, health records. Family members began whispering, then calling, then sharing. Stories about money gone missing, about letters never received, about secrets buried beneath layers of polite dinners and holiday cards. I didn't have to say much more. I had lit the match. The rest of them were carrying torches. My mother, for her part, denied everything. She told neighbors I was mentally unstable. She told my aunt I was being manipulated. She told my cousin I was always too sensitive. But her voice didn't carry the way it used to. Not now, not with the facts unraveling behind her like thread from a torn dress. The investigation started quietly, a private filing, a request for handwriting analysis, a lawyer in the family submitting a petition to reopen my grandmother's case, citing new evidence. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not gleeful, not smug, just calm. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was surviving her. I felt like I had outgrown her. The silence didn't last long. After the baptism, after the reading of the will, after the walk out into cold air and even colder clarity, the phone calls began. Not to me at first, but to each other. Cousins, aunts, in-laws who had once smiled politely at family gatherings now picked up the phone and began comparing notes. Patterns emerged like bruises under bright light. One cousin remembered a loan she'd given my mother that was never paid back. Another spoke of how her college fund mysteriously vanished after a banking error only my mother knew how to fix. An uncle admitted that my mother had persuaded his wife, young, scared, newly pregnant, to consider termination for the sake of the family. That child was never born. Old wills resurfaced. Bank records were reviewed. My grandmother's estate, long thought resolved, showed discrepancies in asset transfers, beneficiary names altered, documents lost, then replaced. The lawyer cousin who'd once barely looked me in the eye now sat with me at a diner, scribbling timelines and statements on a napkin, saying, "Emily, this goes deeper than we thought." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The kind of stillness that comes after a hurricane when the air is heavy with the scent of uprooted earth. I went home that evening and made tea. No music, no lights except the soft lamp in the corner. I sat at my kitchen table, cupping warmth in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't even think of crying. Instead, I walked to the mirror above the fireplace, looked at myself, really looked, and whispered, "You're not her little girl anymore." I meant it. The lawsuit moved faster than expected. With mounting evidence and multiple witnesses, the court had little reason to uphold the falsified will. The original document was authenticated, the forgery confirmed. The judge's ruling was direct, almost impersonal. The estate shall be distributed according to the verified will. It should have felt like a win. And in some ways it was. But part of me couldn't stop replaying her face at the baptism. How she kept smiling even as the walls crumbled around her. As if she believed she could still rewrite the ending. Maybe she thought she always could. The financial investigation followed. Once the estate ruling was public, new claims emerged. A family friend filed a fraud complaint. 2 former clients of hers, people she helped with paperwork, contacted the state bar. Suddenly, her accounts were frozen. Audits ordered. The woman who once controlled every penny, every detail, every person, was now at the mercy of strangers with badges and court orders. But justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Paperwork and procedures. A slow, steady unraveling. One afternoon, standing in the doorway of the courthouse, my attorney asked if I wanted to proceed with a civil suit, to seek damages, to press criminal charges. I said no. Instead, I made a choice she never would have. I waived my right to claim everything Thomas had left me. I took the condo, yes, that was mine. Not because it held monetary value, but because it had once been a place of love, however brief. The rest, the investments, the cash. I asked to be divided among those my mother had hurt. The cousin whose tuition disappeared. The aunt left out of Grandma's will. The niece whose savings were borrowed. Some cried when they received the letters. Some didn't believe it at first. But I meant it. She'd used inheritance as a weapon. I used it to repair. When my mother found out, she sent me a letter, handwritten, 8 pages long. It started with, "I don't know what they told you," and ended with, "You'll regret making me your enemy." I burned it without reading the rest. Weeks passed, then months. And one day, sitting at my desk, drafting a note to Katie about splitting legal fees, I paused and stared at the keyboard. My mother had always said I was just like her. She meant it as praise when I was obedient. She meant it as a warning when I fought back, but I wasn't like her, not in the way she feared. I typed out a message to Katie and, just before hitting send, added one final sentence. She said I was her reflection. Then I hit send and whispered to no one, "No, I'm the part of her she couldn't control." I didn't leave town with a grand announcement or tearful goodbye. I left the way people slip out of parties they never wanted to attend in the first place. Quietly, with keys in hand and freedom in their chest. The condo sold faster than expected. I didn't pack much, just books, notebooks, a few framed photographs that reminded me of who I used to be. Not the broken parts, but the girl who believed in something better. I kept the tea kettle, the one Thomas gave me during our first winter together. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about warmth, stillness. I moved to a smaller city 3 hours away. No one knew me there. I liked it that way. I didn't post updates, deleted every account, changed my number. The silence was startling at first, like walking into a room with no furniture. But soon, I learned to love the echo of my own voice. My days were simple. Mornings started with journaling. Then long walks, no destination. I took a job part-time at a used bookstore, quiet, dusty, full of people who didn't ask questions. Afternoons were for therapy. I found someone good, someone who didn't flinch when I said emotional abuse and mother in the same sentence. We unpacked everything slowly, gently, like unwrapping bandages from wounds I didn't realize were still bleeding. Evenings, I wrote. Not for an audience, not at first, just for myself. I wrote about the way manipulation can feel like love, how silence can be a weapon, how survival sometimes looks like obedience, and healing often starts with rage. It poured out of me like breath I'd been holding for years. Eventually, it formed chapters, then structure, then a book. I called it Daughter of That Woman. The title made people pause, tilt their heads. That woman? They'd ask. I'd smile. Yes, exactly. I didn't write it to shame her. I wrote it to free myself, and maybe others, because if I had felt this alone, surely others had too. A small publisher picked it up. Niche, trauma-focused, independent. They loved the voice, said it was raw but strangely kind. The book launched quietly, but something about it caught fire. A therapist posted it, then a survivor, then a celebrity with a complicated mother of her own. Emails began to arrive, hundreds of them, from daughters, sons, spouses, people who had been told they were too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. People who had believed the lie that family means unquestioning loyalty. They thanked me for naming it, for saying it out loud. One woman wrote, "Your words made me call my sister for the first time in 12 years. Another said, "You helped me realize I wasn't crazy, just gaslit." I started speaking at small events, then panels, then conferences. I never called myself a motivational speaker. I wasn't there to inspire. I was there to witness, to say, yes, me too, and mean it. Somewhere in all of that, I met someone. His name was Aaron. Quiet, patient. He never tried to fix me, never offered advice I didn't ask for. He listened like it was an art form. Our first date was coffee. On a park bench, no fancy clothes, no masks, just two people, tired of pretending, finally breathing in the same rhythm. He never asked about my mother, not directly. But one night, months in, he said, "You carry silence like armor." I smiled. "And you?" "I used to carry rage," he said. "Now I just carry a map." We built something slow, real, no urgency, just presence. One night, after a speaking event, I stood at the edge of a stage, looking out at rows of chairs filled with people I once believed didn't exist, people like me, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters when someone raises their voice, the rooted kind, the kind that grows in the spaces where chaos used to live. Later that night, sitting in bed with a cup of tea and Aaron's head resting on my shoulder, I opened my journal and wrote just one sentence. "She may have birthed me, but the rest, I resurrected myself,